Good afternoon. Today we're going to review the roof detail which is seen on sheet AE 514 section C2. It looks a little bit like this. And what we have here is the upper corner of a roof. And if you look at the very top, see we have a metal roof. I have to dig around for it a little bit. 24 gauge pre-finished lap seam roofing. And what they're showing is how the stuff is attached. It's tied in with flashing that continues up. And the flashing is spec'd out also as something that is to match the color of the curtain wall frame. I'm going to show you a sample of what that roof might look like. So these are various different things that are available from a company called ATAS International Incorporated. I've actually used some of this product. It's very easy to work with. If you look at this one, the colonial seam, it nails down and the next piece clicks onto it, and that has an edge like this, so it goes on pretty quickly. I'm not sure exactly what type they want to use on the building that we're talking about today, but these are just some examples for you to look at. Getting back to the actual plans. So this goes into great detail on how it's flashed, how it comes up and it meets the next curtain wall. It has insulation information on it. As you scroll down a little bit here, it shows the actual finish of the ceiling in the room that's directly below it. In this case, it shows that we have 5/8 inch gypsum board, which is painted this 5/8 inch sheetrock. And then around the perimeter of the room, they have this roller shade, which is actually built into the ceiling. It's a nice, neat little installation on that. As we continue outward on this, we have a curtain wall. It shows in pretty good detail how that is integrated into the wall. We have framing above the actual roller shade. It shows how that's attached into the exterior, how the exterior is framed into the roof framing. I could spend hours going through this trying to explain how it's built. We'll stick to the basics. It shows how the spray foam insulation is to be applied to it. It specs out how thick they want it to be on the exterior surfaces. It shows how it actually, the smaller framing anchors into the bigger framing, and in this case it's a steel tube that's shown in this picture. So you have the steel studs are actually screwed in. They spec out on that the 3 5/8 inch framing. That gets framed in at 16 inches on center. All of this is integrated, and it comes back to the main support structure, which is the skeleton of the building. So I was a little curious about the actual curtain walls and how they were built, so I found a website that showed some samples of that. I'll pull that up here for you to look at. And that is, I found a company called Copper Development Association, and they have a really neat little schematic on it, which shows how it looks from the outside. They show where the curtain walls would be installed along the floor line, so it looks uniform from the outside, but you don't actually see the floor or any of the stuff that's hidden behind it. And then as you go down, they show that it's gridded off, and you have plate glass sections. In this case, they're pretty big. And they have another curtain wall that goes in front of the windows, and they spec out in their diagram here this type of material, the Muntz metal spandrel. And then you get a cross-cut view of it. It shows where the floor line is. It shows a bracket that holds it in place, and that's actually supporting the structure part of the curtain wall. The actual glass is attached via this whole attachment point here, and if you go up, it stacks up, and I would assume that this is supporting the brunt of the weight, whereas all this is integrated into the curtain wall to support the weight of the glass. And if you go down further, they have a neat little diagram that shows how all this stuff is bolted together. And this is that diagram that shows the support on the actual floor slab, which is then supported on a steel beam somewhere else, but this diagram doesn't show that. So getting back to the drawing again, this shows a curtain wall. We come up here, it shows how everything frames in, It shows that they have a larger piece of framing here, which supports the structure for the actual roof. We see a drip edge. It's all incorporated into here, which is all to be installed behind the actual roof edging. The roof clicks into that. In this case, it goes around it rather than going under it. Now, if we follow the roofing back, it goes back in and it is actually rolled into the flashing. The flashing goes up, it goes underneath and up again behind the actual curtain wall or any kind of glass that's up there. And that's what makes this a watertight, sealed up unit. And then in here, they go on to spec out how they want it to be sealed between the actual curtain wall and the flashing, and they're using a Baccarat assembly, which is this little round guy in here. And then it gets caulked in on top of that. They spec that out up here. Everything, every little detail is itemized out on this plan, so there's no question about it. It tells you what gauge metal that you want to use for your galvanized angles, the Baccarat and the sealant, the pre-finished metal details, how everything is put together, the type of roofing. In this case, they're calling it a lap seam roofing, which if we go back to that detail, some company makes something that meets these specs, and that's what they're using. They have ice and water shield that goes in behind that. Ice and water shield is meant to block any water that may somehow find its way behind the steel or condensation from going any further. It basically stops at the ice and water shield. Beneath that, they're using 5/8 inch fire-treated plywood. I am sure that is a code issue, which is why it has to be fire-treated. 2x12 plate is anchored to the stud framing. It's pressure-treated. They're showing the intervals that they want you to use to nail and screw it. Everything is very specific on this. I think a lot of the reason they do that is, one, for strength, but secondly, it's so far up, you've got a wind shear issue too, so they want to make sure that it doesn't blow apart. With the steel framing, if any wind got behind it, it would come right up, unless it's installed properly. So this detail here goes on to show the actual glazing, or in this case, a curtain wall, how it's assembled. This all fits into its own little channel. This down here shows how it goes together. This is a manufactured product. It's all going to be uniform throughout the building. So everything goes in the same way. And it just shows how it all stacks together and is sealed up. So if we look at that, and then we go and we look at some of these other diagrams, you can see that there's a lot of continuity in how all this stuff works together. For example, we have a skylight detail. This is a product similar to a Solitude, which is like a little miniature skylight, maybe a foot around, that lets a lot of room and light into the room. Here, any wood that's put in place, they're showing how it's actually anchored down into the concrete with anchor bolts. More details surrounding a steel I-beam. This is a gutter detail. It shows how the roof drains work. But the main focus of this was just this one little area here, which is where we started. So that concludes this part of the video. Thank you.